We are running. Okay, can I firstly remind everyone present that this meeting will be live streamed as well as being recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Can I also say to everyone that, well, I'm sure just about everyone who's present is well aware of housekeeping rules. There is the facility to raise your hand if necessary through Teams. If for any reason you have any difficulty doing that, then please wave your hand about, raise it, jump up and down, whatever. The chat facility should only be used for technical issues. So if there are any difficulties with your connection, please use that to, well, if difficulties with connection, you probably use the chat facility anyway. But if you're having any difficulties, use it for that, not for discussing matters that we're going to deal with here tonight. So if you have any difficulties, then obviously the usual suggestion is to turn off your camera so to affect bandwidth, and if necessary, there are problems, I'd ask you all to do that so that we don't have any difficulty, but everyone seems to be okay at the moment. So we will start the meeting proper. So it's a special meeting of the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee to discuss a call-in by Councillor Ian Johnson. So as we'll start the meeting formally, agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I think you have one, don't you?
I've had apologies from Councillor Parker, and I have also had apologies from Mr. Gapper, the Welsh Medium co-opted member.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, then we'll move on to item 3, the call-in, which I say is by Councillor Dr. Ian Johnson. Consideration of the response to the arts consultation and subsequent recommendations of Cabinet on the 21st of June. I'll take the meeting in a certain order. We'll start off with Councillor Johnson as it's his call-in, so he presents that call-in. So, Councillor Johnson, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the committee for their forbearance in attending an additional meeting to discuss a call-in. Unfortunately, I think the amount on the agenda for the last meeting made it difficult to give this as much time and assessment as I would hope that it has tonight. Members of the committee will be aware that there was a consultation on the art strategy which took place between February and March 2020. The results of that were reported to Cabinet in June 2021. The recommendations of that include that an options appraisal be developed to evaluate a new operating model for the Arts and Culture Service and review the implications of the Arts and Culture Strategy. The reason for this call-in is related to the suggestions that I wrote to Cabinet for their meeting in June, which is that the broader interest of this area means that it's better served by hearing committees' thoughts on this and the thoughts of the wider public and those engaged with the arts, rather than and hearing those so they are included within the development of the options appraisal at the very start, rather than coming to committee and to the wider arts community later in the process. So it's important, I felt, that those who were involved in developing the options appraisal were able to hear what committee thought and what external organisations thought. And I'm pleased that some of them have made written representations and that we're going to be hearing from a public speaker, so that those can be considered within the development of the appraisal. I say this in the context of a couple of things. Firstly, obviously, since the art strategy took place, there has been, of course, the coronavirus pandemic. So there's been a wider shift and concerns. We've also had changes within the council, for example, taking on board the Penarth Pier Pavilion. There are a couple of points that I do want to sort of just to throw in here because I think they are relevant and important. Firstly, of course, is that the results of the consultation were actually carried out in April 2020, but it took another almost year and a quarter for that to be packaged together into a cabinet report, even though I asked, I think, on 2 occasions as to when that was going to be taking place. There's been a new reserve created for arts, culture and libraries. I'd be interested to understand more of the aims and goals of that. I understand that there are adverts have gone out and staff recruited regarding the Penarth Pier Pavilion. I'd appreciate an update on that. And those of you with long memories will also recall that in February last year, full council discussed proposals regarding history and heritage in the council, which was a part of a report that came to this committee. I think it was January last year. And the February meeting of council, it was agreed that actually that would be wrapped into the arts strategy as we went forward, except that hasn't really been covered within the cabinet report that came in came last month. So there's a couple of areas which I think I'd be grateful to hear from officers as to how things have been progressing and what decisions have been made, how have they been made, as well as I say, the development of the options appraisal and the opportunity for people within the council and external to the council to contribute. So I'd like to thank you all very much for your time tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian, for that. I don't know, is Councillor McCaffrey with us?
No, she's not, Chair.
No, she's still not, is she? So
No,
I don't know what the intention was here, because the next step really would be to hear from either the cabinet member and or officers in response to what Councillor Johnson has said. I don't know whether, Liz, you want to do that or whether the officers will do that.
Well, I can either speak now or I can speak after. Yeah, you've got a public speaker, or
Yeah.
when Trevor does. I mean, there are comments that I will make, but where that goes in, I'm not.
Well, I think the appropriate thing would be now for someone either from the administration or from the directorate to comment on what Councillor Johnson has said and put any views they have forward. So, as I say, whether you'd prefer to let the officers do that.
If Trevor wants to start off, I'm assuming it's Trevor, and I'll continue afterwards.
Yep, that's absolutely fine.
Something just decided to block my screen, so I can try and unblock it.
Shall I start us off then?
Yes, if you could, Trevor.
So I'll apologise in advance because I don't think I caught everything that Councillor Johnson was saying. So do chime in if I've forgotten to address any of the points. I guess the first thing you mentioned is in regards to the timescales of getting the report through. All I can say towards that is this is the reality of the impact of dealing with coronavirus within learning and skills, and the priority for us has been managing hub provision, managing library provision, managing meal provision. Staff have been working 50, 60, 70-hour weeks on weekends and over evenings. So it isn't because we don't want to do it. It's because we haven't had the capacity to do it as quickly as we would have liked to. That said, in relation to the pier, I mean, this is something that came to us in the middle of a pandemic. It's not the time that you would want to take over a program like that, but we felt at the time when the issues were presenting itself with the pier that it made a lot of sense to bring that into learning and skills because it fit in quite nicely with the discussions we had previously about what we were going to do to support the arts, and there was an opportunity to test some of those things out. You mentioned about staffing in relation to the Penarth Pier. So yes, we did advertise for a new pavilion manager. There was a couple of things that we wanted to get in that post, and a lot of it was off of the back of the consultation and the discussion we had at scrutiny previously. So we have appointed. We are due to have that person start with us in August, which is fantastic news. They've got a brilliant background. They've got experience in sales and marketing. They've got experience directly with the arts and running events. So we're very excited to have them joining us soon. We've met with them a couple of times and we're working on that handover. So that's been really positive. You mentioned about the Arts and Culture Reserve. So again, this was off the back of the discussions we had. And a lot of the feedback we had was there needs to be some investment, not only in Arts Central, but in the service as a whole. And we didn't have a reserve for that. We didn't have a pot of money. All we had was our regular budget. So that was the intention of setting up that fund, that reserve, to invest in those areas. And Art Central is specifically mentioned in that, because of course what's come through the consultation that we did and the feedback from the 300 respondents was the importance of Art Central and making that a success. So that's why that fund is there, to allow us to do some of that. One of the opportunities with the pavilion is we've been able to test some of those theories, because respondents said, for example, things like I think it was 86-87% wanted us to look at income generation activities through Art Central to make it more sustainable. So we've been able to test those at the pavilion, given the opportunities it's presented, and we've got some very clear avenues to do that, to bring in regular revenue streams into all of our galleries, Art Central and the pavilion, going forward, which is going to allow us to do a lot of things. Off of that as well, we've got the makerspace that's starting off in Penarth this summer. We have appointed a makerspace manager for that as well. That's a bit of a hybrid between arts and culture and library, but the intention with that space is basically an outlet for 21st century art. So if you think about different types of artistic expression, 3D printer, CAD design, music, video, that kind of stuff, then there is going to be a place for people to come and to use those services locally. And there aren't many of those places around at the moment. What else was there? Sorry, Councillor.
I'm trying to remember exactly what I said. So it's, I mean, the purpose of the call-in really was to hear opinions from the committee and from external bodies with regards to sort of how future options could be developed to enable, because the purpose was that people could that they would be in at the start of the process rather than coming in at the end and responding to what's been developed in relative isolation from other council members and perhaps also other groups. That was the wider point of the purpose of this call-in. So I think you've answered most of the queries that I was raising there, but the queries aren't the reason for the call-in.
No, that's fine. I mean, the intention was, and I think it was mentioned at Cabinet, certainly in the minutes as well, was to do this officer's appraisal to provide some context and have a discussion at that point. So I wouldn't want folks to think that this is being done in isolation and a fait accompli was going to be presented at the end. It's just we haven't done the work in terms of what some of these operating models might look like. There's a few of them that have been mentioned in the report that went to Cabinet, and a lot of those were off the back of the feedback we had from the speakers and some of our existing partners, which are worth exploring. I suppose the other opportunities that are presenting themselves, and again, this is a moving beast because it is currently happening as we speak with the pavilion, is there are new community groups that we're engaging with. So for example, there are cinema groups, there are local well-being groups that we've been engaging with as well. So that's going to provide some additional opportunity and for feedback. One of the things that isn't captured in this report, but was captured in a separate report, was the consultation on the use of the peer specifically, but of course there is a lot of overlap in terms of those responses. We had well over 1,000 responses in relation to the use of the peer, and that was predominantly around heritage, arts and culture. There were some other questions asked, similar to what we asked with the arts one around, do we look at retail, for example, or do we look at making it a business space and a collision space and those sorts of things? But it was loud and clear around heritage. One of the other things we've been able to test out that came through the discussions from the paper we're discussing today was in terms of things like live music events. So we've been able to test the waters for those. So we had the Penarth Music Festival. I think it was, within the context of COVID, the largest in-person attendee in Wales, if I'm not mistaken, at the time. And granted, that was only about 10 people, but it's still something new for us going forward, and that's worked really well. We're currently in discussions about what sort of infrastructure we need to be putting into Art Central to offer that kind of stuff in that space as well, to make it more multi-use. One of the other things we've done with over the COVID period, again, there was work that was done in relation to art. So we put on an exhibition, The Arts in Isolation. So this was to get people to do works of art at home when we were in lockdown 1.0, and submit those. And we did a digital exhibition on that. We now have a physical exhibition, so those works are now housed and have just opened at Art Central in Barry. And I would encourage everyone to go and see them because they are brilliant. And then digitally, that's being beamed in the pavilion as well on the large screen, so that people can come in and have a look. The other theme that came through the discussions previously that we've been testing out are in relation to widening access. So this is big on my agenda because, especially thinking about COVID and the impact that arts as an outlet for well-being is going forward, making sure that's accessible to everyone and loads of people have opportunities to see that is really important. So we ran some pilot events, bringing some of our library events down into the pavilion gallery when we just opened it, to bring in families. And some of the comments we had back from there for people there were, I've lived in Penarth for 15 years and I've never actually been in the pavilion. And this is similar feedback that we had with Art Central. So there's a program of works that we're looking at doing to bring those sorts of events, like taster events, to come and see the galleries, to come and see the artworks, and to come and do those events across both sites. So absolutely, that we've had a couple of written representations today which have come through, which have been really useful. The discussions we had at the previous scrutiny committee were really, really useful, because everybody's on board and wants to be part of the solution with arts, which is fantastic. As I said, we don't have any context to discuss with you yet in terms of what some of these operating models might be, what some of the challenges or opportunities are, or how we might execute them going forward, because we haven't had time to do that. But more than happy to, to have the discussion and to listen. And if there are any questions we can answer in the interim, then we can do that. The intention will be, when the options appraisal is done, then that goes through consultation and it will come back here, and it will go with our partners and stakeholders and the public as well on that, because it's fair to say, and you alluded to the point earlier, the art strategy that we have in place currently, I don't think is fit for purpose anymore, in the way that the world has developed, in the way that we need to take things forward, and the needs of the community in using arts, especially as an opportunity for well-being, but also as an opportunity for socialization, an opportunity for free expression, and a mechanism for us to engage with people of all ages, basically in a creative manner. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. I can see, obviously, as we mentioned at the beginning, Councillor McCaffrey unfortunately can't be with us due to IT issues, but Councillor Nett, as Deputy Leader, is here. She has her hand raised. Liz, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I could. Yeah, in fact, it's sort of a bit hybrid because libraries come under education. I think that Trevor understated it slightly when he was talking about why this was brought now rather than earlier. To say staff were a bit busy is a complete understatement, and some not only working, delivering extra things, but actually in other departments as well. So, we had library staff actually doing business grants. So there were things that we did do in the pandemic, which were lots of things, but there were things that got put to one side, and that was, justifiably so, because it wasn't an urgent item, and that was a decision taken. I think it's worth looking at the recommendations, because in effect what they are saying is the first two recommendations reflect the fact that this is a consultation report. So it looks at the consultation report and then it says what next, and what next is the development of an options appraisal. So, you know, that's plain and simply what it is, the options appraisal, because it will likely have budget implications, has to come back to Cabinet, and it will come back to Cabinet and it will come back to scrutiny for further discussion. The scope of that options appraisal is basically laid out within the report in terms of the things that have to be considered within it, what was taken into account. But I think it's very beneficial that not only did we have the experience of the consultation, we had the experience of what life is like post-pandemic, and how things are different, how they're working, and also the experience now of the peer pavilion and how people embrace the arts if it's made more accessible. So I very much look forward to the options appraisal being carried out, particularly now our officers have got experience of other ways of delivering arts to a wider public, and discussing that options appraisal at a future point with scrutiny. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I can see that, Ian, you've got your hand up now. I'm not strictly sure in the rules whether you should. I presume you want to ask some questions, do you?
I just want. I remembered what it was that Trev. I'd mentioned earlier that Trevor hadn't responded to, which was the questions regarding heritage, because we had that discussion at full in committee here and then at full council in February 2020, and I don't feel that's necessarily reflected in the document we have here. So how that's going to work, I do just want to very quickly say, I'm not here, criticising and attacking and nor am I anticipating that that staff or cabinet members can provide us with all of the answers, because this is, I see this as this call-in is part of the process of everybody having a discussion around this before those options are fully prepared. And just for reference, I do also want to just point out, because I forgot to mention in my introduction, that I also, as a volunteer at the Barry Arts Festival, which is a non-profit making organisation, so I do have a broader interest in the arts. I'm not a member of this committee, and it's not a declaration of interest. It's just for reference for people to be aware that I have interests in this field. Thank you, Chair, and I think that hopefully that's the last bit I'll be speaking for a long time here. Thank you.
We'll let you come back a bit later, don't worry. I don't know if you want to add anything more, Trevor, after.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I guess the short answer to that is this report that we have today is the consultation report. So it was only dealing with the responses from that consultation. I did make the decision to include the pandemic stuff in there because you can't ignore the pandemic's impact of it. And certainly there are very few silver linings with the pandemic. One of the silver linings that has come through is the opportunity and the learning we've had through the pavilion. The other one is what Liz has mentioned about people coming across from all over and working on this. So previously, if you'd spoken to other parts of the council about the arts, that's something that Learning and Skills does. Now we've got people who are directly involved on a day-to-day basis with the arts, from neighbourhood services, from security, from Learning and Skills, from catering, from Big Fresh, our external partners, trying to make this thing work really quickly. And the amount of learning that's happened from that, and raising the profile of what arts is, not just only externally, but internally within the council, can't be understated. So the bit about heritage that we were speaking about previously, that's going to be reflected in how that integrates with whatever operating models we look at and what the strategy becomes for arts going forward. So it's not a case of it being ignored. It's just it didn't have a fit in this report because it was mainly to report back on the consultation.
Okay, thank you very much. I can see I've got two hands raised, Councillor Hodges and Councillor Thomas. If perhaps we can leave this until a little bit later for you to come in, because you'll have an opportunity of raising points when we've heard all the evidence we're going to have this afternoon. So unless there's anyone else, any other member of the committee feels we should deal with this, my view is I think we should perhaps hear the public speaker that we've got, consider the written representations we have, and then perhaps we can come back to a debate and questions from members later on. So if we have one public speaker, I think. Is that correct, Catherine?
Yes, only one registered speaker, and Mr. Clark did come on camera for us earlier, so I'm just wondering if we could do it again, please.
Yes, I did see him earlier. Mr. Clark, are you there?
Mr. Clark?
My image is there. I think Trevor can see it.
I can see.
I can see
right,
you now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay.
Right, you have, and I want you to be ready to start, because as you've probably been told, you have 3 minutes to give your evidence. Catherine is very, very strict on things like that, and will step in immediately should you exceed that. But I'm sure you've got everything very well timed anyway. So over to you. 3 minutes to start when you start.
For you, Chair. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yes. Well, we began this debate back in 2019 when the fear was that Art Central Gallery was going to be closed. And you recall the Friends of Art Central rose up to identify failures at Art Central. And as I can see it, a core argument has already been quietly accepted, as my reading of the report before you is that it consistently now refers to arts in the plural central, which is a huge step forward, absolutely brilliant. The Friends and other respected groups wanted to see a programme of events that celebrates the wide spectrum of arts available in the Vale. The programme would include periods of tutoring, of budding artists and of school children. Now, since the last meeting about 17 months ago that we attended, Penarth Pier has fallen into consideration. The reasons for this might scream failure to some people, but we'd prefer to place that into our learning curve and make use of what it actually tells us. Why did it fail, and what can we do to avoid similar failure going forward? We just want to improve the model rather than imagine that Penarth Pier's experience flags up some sort of error. But this shouldn't be only about Art Central and Penarth Pier, because both towns have much more to offer and to develop. But then there's the rest of the Vale. Boy, is that a large area, an area with loads to contribute, an area that needs to be incorporated into any plan. We can't have division in something that should be county-wide. I don't need to debate much with you whether we need to go in one direction or another. I suspect that we're all agreed on so much, including that we want to see an extension of learning arts and culture in the Vale. We want more of our Vale residents to benefit from our arts and culture. We want to see more integration of the arts and culture in education. We want to know what's happening throughout the Vale before it happens, and we want a vibrant arts and culture industry in the Vale that's sustainable, all of which will help to increase tourism and perhaps encourage tourists to leave their spare cash with us. I mean, I've got no doubt we can agree a great deal more, but the question remains, do we have the ambition for the Vale to achieve what we all want to see? Can we agree that we need an independent body, peopled correctly by representatives whose job it is to push forward the ambitions set by the Vale Council? Oversight remains by the Council, absolutely essential, and the body needs to remain responsible to the council and to the people of the Vale. It must be able to demonstrate good progress towards the Vale-wide goal. I think my time's about to expire. I just want to say we have to succeed, and we don't want to be beaten back by a fear of failure. We can't fail. We must achieve what we know has to be achievable. Thank you, Chair. I remain available for questions.
Okay, thank you very, very much. At this point, as with any scrutiny meeting, members of the committee have the opportunity of asking anyone who gives evidence to clarify any point that they wish. Is not so much to enter into any debate with them, but it's just for points of clarification. Are there any points of clarification? No, Nick, you don't. You just, your hand's still up, I can see. So we'll get you. Don't worry. but no points of clarification. Okay, well, thank you very much for that contribution. That was greatly appreciated. We have two written representations, one from Dr. Jane Salisbury and one from Nina Lazarou. I'm assuming that all members have had an opportunity of reading those and considering them. I could upset you all by reading them through, but I won't do that if you've all read them. So we'll take those as read. Now, I think at this point it's appropriate to ask, based on the evidence we've heard, whether any the cabinet member or any officers wish to make any comments on that evidence. Trevor.
Howdy, thank you. I just wanted to say, I agree with everything that was stated by the speaker, and thank you for that. I just wanted to respond to the point on ambition. Are we ambitious? I think we're very ambitious. I think the fact that we've been able to turn around a new local authority trading company, which has just returned 500 grand into schools, the fact that we've relaunched the pavilion with a cafe in it that's made over £70,000 since it's launched. The fact that we've got schools involved in the works there. We have one of our local schools has just won a Heritage Prize based on some work on the Penarth Pavilion. We are an ambitious lot, almost to a fault, and we love to do things differently. So I'm very excited about the opportunities that brings, and I think the point is very true that was also made about this isn't just about Barry and Penarth, this is about the wider Vale. There are lots of different outlets and venues that we can use. Putting my education hat on, you're talking to the fellow who does 21st century schools. We've got lovely new environments there that we can use. One of the more recent experiences that was really, really well received and had a big impact was with the co-ed project in Barry. When the former schools closed down and the new schools opened, we did an event through Arts Central where we're honouring the past, and we were talking about some of the events that were done previously, and that has a legacy effect and a very positive impact on those pupils and young people. And that's where I'm coming from, and that's where I want to take us going forward. So I'm glad we're all on the same page with that. Okay. Because there we go.
Thank you for that. Though you need to be careful about ambition. You know what Mark Antony said about Julius Caesar and ambition, but when you're speaking over his body, so we want to be very careful about that. So anyway, thank you for that, Trevor. Okay, that's the evidence we've got now. Councillor Johnson, do you want to come back and make any points on what you've heard?
Wasn't really to make any points I've heard, but I mean I would be interested in, obviously we've heard Mr. Clark there speaking, but also I would be interested to hear any thoughts that the officers have on the other two pieces of representation that have come forward, just what they think about those ideas or how those will be incorporated. I think would be quite interesting.
Okay, Trevor, anything particularly on the two written pieces of evidence?
No, I mean, other than how we work with other organizations going forward is going to form part of this review, and there are a number of different models that can work with that going forward. Developing some kind of arts curriculum is something that's reflected in education. That's something that we're looking at doing with the makerspace, for example. That's something that we can look to do certainly going forward. So nothing specifically other than they're valid points, and we need to look at those options as we go through the appraisal.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, at this point, really, it's to open it up to debate amongst members of the committee, and I'm well aware that Councillor Nick Hodges has had his hand raised for a long time. And you've had it raised and you haven't left the room at all. So I assume it's you want to speak rather than anything else. So, Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Last couple of meetings, I've been putting my hand up and it stays up, and I can't take it down. So excuse me for that. But certainly, do want to speak. I'm just referring really to the actual report, which is the review of the Art Service Consultation Report, April 2020. Now, I'm sorry the pages aren't numbered, but I'd like to refer to a specific part of it. It's most of the way to the back, and it's the section that are called income generation. And it's a bit on one page and a bit over the page. It's a bit over the page I want. And it refers briefly to, I'll read the paragraph. In addition to the Welsh Government increase, the Council has also proposed an increase in council tax, Band D, of 4.5%. That is likely to rebalance the budget. This increase was suggested as a source of funding a museum in Barry at a 0.2 percentage cost recovery rate for 150,000. Now, as gratified as I am to see the word museum, or even, dare I say, heritage centre included in the report, because this is now 15 months of whatever on, I was just wondering, have any works progressed on this? Any ideas or thoughts towards it? And I have to say that you won't get much of a museum for 150,000. So I was just wondering if the council would be prepared to seek heritage lottery funding, funding from any other sources possible, and if there's been any progress on the subject. That's all.
Okay, thank you for that. That's very helpful. I think it's an interesting point you make. I don't know whether it's probably best perhaps to have comments from members and then perhaps for Trevor to come back and deal with them all at one time. Do you want to do that, Trevor, or would you prefer to deal with them as they're raised?
No, we can do them all at once if you like.
Okay, well, I think I've got next Councillor Neil Thomas. Neil.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to start off by thanking Trevor for both his report, which is excellent, and for his presentation this evening, which has been superlative. Thank you very much, Trevor. It's been really good and very informative. The discussion previously that Councillor Hodges referred to in terms of the museum for Barry that is something which he's very keen on. I recall that discussion. I recall that actually it was widened to the need for a museum across the county, or museum type facilities across the county, and use of public spaces within other settings, not just for Barry, but for other parts of the county, with perhaps pop-up displays and pop-up exhibitions turning up in various places. He's shaking his head, but I do recall that conversation, that discussion in the scrutiny meeting, because I was part of that discussion, and that was generally accepted as being a way forward. The Vale is actually very well blessed in space for art and for pop-up stuff, both private and public spaces. Certainly, there are private galleries dotted around some of our towns. We also have spaces, as has been mentioned, things like the Pier Pavilion, and Penarth Council have their own space in the Turner Gallery. All of which can contribute to arts and so forth. And yes, I agree that art isn't just painting and daubs or pieces of sculpture, but it's also the performing arts of the various different types. It's street art. It's musical art. There's all sorts of things that should be included and should be kept in. We have examples of successful art venues around the area, including as it is now. It is now succeeding at the pier. Appears to be succeeding, whereas before, when it was being run by the management committee, I believe there are certain problems involved, but there are places like Chapter in Cardiff and the Norwegian Church in Cardiff where private artists can rent space to put on public displays and sell their artworks There's also when it happens, things like Penarth Holiday Festival, when local artists get the opportunity to display their art and sell it along the Clifftop Path. So we do have a lot of venues and lots of outlets for that kind of thing. And generally speaking, I think it is the responsibility of the council to support that and support these outlets. And I welcome this report, and I look forward to seeing the next steps forward in establishing this. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Perks, Sandra, you want to
yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you. I'm really heartened to hear about the success of the Pier Pavilion and the sort of the money generating that's going on with the cafe, and the success of the sort of partnership with the catering company and things like that. I suppose for myself, when we spoke at the last scrutiny committee for this report, I was saying that I would like to see something that's a bit like the chapter. Obviously, it's going to be a much smaller scale, but something that's vibrant, that cuts across all sort of art sort of areas and appeals to, you know, the wider demographic of the Vale, so that it is welcoming to all residents, that people don't feel put off of wanting to go through the door. And I think it sounds like the Pier Pavilion might have that sort of appeal already, and I wondered if you're going to use the experiences there to try and do things within Art Central as well, so we can ensure, you know, that we get young and old alike coming in through that door. Yeah, so I just wondered if you had sort of any sort of not figures as such, but idea of sort of the demographic of the people that are using the Pier Pavilion. I know because it's a tourist area as well, you're going to get lots of different people in, but whether they actually come into the pavilion itself and look at the art and participate, and whether that's something that we can take forward into Art Central. I really like the idea of it remaining in-house within the Vale of Glamorgan, and us sort of using the skills that we have with the different officers and things like that, you know, sort of and the way that you've brought things forward as well, Trevor, you know, and ensuring the success there is really fantastic. But I look forward to the report coming back to scrutiny as well, and looking at that as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I'll come to the other speakers now, but I just noticed, yeah, if you're talking about sort of age and the demographic generally, looking at the respondents, it was very heavily concentrated in the 55 to 74-year-old bracket. Now I'm just wondering whether that's people who have just come up to the age of retirement and are still in the who are still feeling young at heart, etc., who get involved in this, and the other group seem to be not to become involved in it, which might be a little, you know, is perhaps a little disappointing. But perhaps that's something now. I think I can see I've got Councillor Liz Burnett wanted to come in next. Liz?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify a few things, because we've talked about user base, and it's actually been quite interesting with the pavilion, the diversity of the users within that. But I think that I can remember a conversation that I had with some officers about what do we want for the pavilion, and I said I don't have any specific vision, except I want it to be full of happy people. I want it to be of the town. And things like having the children's library there, having half-term courses where children were learning juggling and making paintings with bikes and that sort of thing, was perfectly working with that. It was getting people used to going back into that space, and also people like me who like the bacon sandwiches were there all the time. So, you know, that has worked really well. But we were talking about, you know, talking earlier about income generation, and another lesson that's been learned from the operation of the pavilion is the power of profit with a purpose. This is about, people talk about not-for-profit. There is not for private profit, but definitely you need to create a surplus, because that is the only way that we will be able to protect venues such as these for the public going forward. you know, it sounds scaremongering, but when over 80% of our budget goes on schools and social care, then we have to really look at how we make the things that matter to us sustainable. The arts and heritage and culture are hugely important, but we have to find a way of investing effectively in them. And I think that's what I would say. What I've been astonished at is the talent and skills of officers across the council to be able to pull that together quickly. And I have every confidence that they will be doing the same as they go towards developing an options appraisal into the future. And you know, I won't call on him, but the one person I would love to hear his views on is Martin, who has got huge experience in this area, and I know I've quoted him frequently. So, you know, this is the sort of model that we're going to have to be looking at going forward.
Okay, well, Marty's not saying anything at the moment, but I can see that that Julie wants to come in, so over to you. You're on mute, I think.
Oh, the mute button. It's lovely to see people passionate about this subject. I mean, talking as I do from schools, the one thing they have really missed is the visitors, the artists, the painters, etc. People design St Athan School gates. You know, it's very important for schools that you have art and culture in their and heritage in their lives. So it's lovely that you've had this debate and it's been very passionate. I have to say, it's been lovely to be able to recommend Penarth Pier to my friends who live in other places. So that has been fantastic, and I've had a few visits. So and about ambition, I don't think we can be over ambitious. I think we need to sell ourselves, if you like. I mean, I don't think the Vale sells itself as much as it could. It's a very beautiful place. I mean, I've just come back off holiday, and how other places just use the smallest things that we've got, but we don't promote them or whatever. And that's basically what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Norman, Jane, you there somewhere? Yes.
Yeah, thank
Glad
you.
to see you.
Thank you, Chair. Just listening to the debate, and yes, oh, excuse me, it is essential that we keep this facility alive. But I think what we have to be very, very mindful of is the arts themselves have a very, not so much now, but it has in the past, have a very elitist outlook on things, and we need to make sure that this is open to all members of society, not just the people who I would say have been catered for in the past. It's very, very easy to take one strata of society and cater for them, and ignore the rest of society. I think we must make sure that this facility is open to everyone, that everyone has a chance to express themselves, whether, as I say, it's painting, whether it's singing, dancing, sculpting, whatever they do, to have the facility to display their work for other people to come in and view it, for maybe art groups to go in there and display their work, whatever sort of art group it is. And I'm not being a resident of Barry, I'm not sure what happens here, but access, do the public still go through the main doors where Barry Town Hall is now, Barry Town Council is, or do they access from the library? I don't know, because I think we need to have this more open access, because I know when it was through the front doors where the town council is now, the access was very, very limited. So I don't know what the access is there now. Perhaps somebody could enlighten me on that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Martin, you want to come in?
Hi, thanks Liz for the sort of prompting me to say something. I've spent the last 20 years helping councils and other organisations to create social enterprises and try and work in imaginative ways. And it's great to see the Vale actually thinking out of the box and doing stuff which is exactly the sort of things I've been advocating for a length of time. I'd like to help if in any way I can, if you want me to do anything like that. But the important thing you've got to look at here is what Liz was talking about earlier. It's about making a profit out of these organisations or these buildings and the activities that go in them, which are fundamental and are important to make the Vale a nice place to live for everybody, not just elite people. It's for everybody within the Vale. And I think the way in which the Pier Pavilion has taken off, and I think there's opportunities to other things, and using the Come In, for example, I see you're trying to do something with there. And I think, but there's also an opportunity to work in partnership with all the other arts organisations within the Vale. I mean, Councillor Thomas was talking about what's happening in the Western Vale. When I read this paper, I was sort of saying it's all about Barry and Penarth. Whereas what's happening in Cowbridge and Llantwit? And there are things happening there which need to be integrated into whatever the strategy is going to be, even if they're not being done by the council. There has to be an overall picture of what's going on in the Vale. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. And as always, Martin, as everyone does, when you mention all those large towns in the Vale, you forgot Roos. But there we are. We won't.
Well,
I won't hold that. I won't hold that against you. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Expressing my own views on this, I think we do need to. We do need something to make sure that we have a vibrant arts community and arts, as has been said, across all aspects of it, not just the idea of an art gallery, but the performing arts, everything. To some extent with music, we've got other organisations that contribute a lot to that. I think as far as how this is funded, I have no great problem with private finance coming into this. I'm sure very few people do, but I think perhaps, as is mentioned, private profit, perhaps we shouldn't be having. But we've got to remember so many of the great art galleries throughout the world have been funded initially by private finance, and often still are. So it shouldn't be a problem. Yes, okay, St Athan, but St Athan is slightly smaller. But we mustn't forget anywhere in the Vale. So that I think we've had a good input into this. I don't know if there's any other members who haven't contributed yet who want to put their views forward. No. Oh, is that another hand up, Nick? Or yes, I know you have trouble with raising and lowering your hand, but yes, okay, in you come.
Yeah, just briefly, Chairman. I mean, I haven't really had an answer on any progress towards a museum, but the other thing is, when it comes to heritage, if we're not careful and have nowhere to present, preserve, display our heritage, we lose it. And there's been an example literally last couple of days with the dinosaur footprints of the Bendricks, a piece of Barry history carved out the rock and taken immediately to the museum in Cardiff. Now, whilst I have no problem with Cardiff keeping stuff rather than London on our behalf, I would prefer it to be displayed in Barry. And just think that as part of a museum or heritage centre, that you could have based an entire dinosaurs or prehistoric exhibition around that. Opportunity gone, unless we get somewhere and ask for it back. So I'm worried. I certainly do remember the debate early last year. And I do remember talking about being told about a small pop-up display here and there. That is not a museum, that is not heritage, that is not a draw, it will not work. You need a permanent, decent base where you can change things, show things, and have big displays. Otherwise, you're whistling in the wind. So that's what needs to be done, and you can base an entire art strategy around that, and you can actually change the ethos of a part of your main town by the businesses that it draws around it. And that's a trick we're missing.
Okay, thank you for that, Nick. Yeah, talking about sort of heritage and not quite as far back as dinosaurs, but I remember all the talk and certainly at cabinet that there was talk about explanation about what had been going on with the excavations on the 5 Mile Lane and the fantastic things that were found there. And I know there was intentions to try and have a sort of touring exhibition in the Vale as far as that was concerned. Now, I know probably COVID as with so many things has caused a problem, but I don't know if Trevor can enlighten us at all on that.
I was just going to touch on a couple, because there's a couple of themes that have come up from that discussion that might be useful if I respond to really quickly. One of them, I mean, one of the ambitions that we have going forward is, and it's reflected in a lot of the comments that were presented tonight, is about developing an ecosystem around the arts. So it isn't just a venue that does a thing off in isolation somewhere, because that brings with it issues around widening access. So we've had themes about widening access before, and we need to bring more people in. So developing an ecosystem that has revenue streams, that has diversity, that has variability in what it does, where it does, what we're presenting, to get people involved, that's key to what we need to do going forward. And partnership working with folks who know better than we do on how to do some of these things is really, really key, and leveraging some of that expertise. It was very interesting when we opened up the pier, we intentionally got some of the library service to come in and run some children's events. We did that so that children would come in and they would bring in their parents. And it was that point I made earlier about many parents coming in saying, I've never been in here before. Isn't that great? Phil and Tracy and I have spent evenings and weekends digging out pieces of art that we found in various places in the pavilion and hanging it on the wall. And we opened up the gallery to the cafe so that people can come in and sit. And we've had comments about people saying, well, I didn't know this was here, and tell me about this piece of work, and actually generating interest. And I've had a number of emails from folks in the community across all ages email me saying, I did a project on the pier, I did a piece of work around this, how can I display it? So that's really key. The element about selling ourselves is very valid, and that came through loud and clear in some of the previous discussions, and I don't disagree with any of that. We do have to sell ourselves better. We have to promote ourselves better. One of the, again, there are a few, but one of the silver linings over COVID is the speed and intensity at which we've had to work with others across the council, especially around events and tourism and supporting their work, and vice versa. With bringing these venues back into operation, be it the pier or be it Art Central, when that was turned into a testing site overnight, has meant that we've been able to have these discussions. So we're looking at bespoke social media channels for these sorts of things. We're looking at bespoke websites for those sorts of things as well. In terms of funding, bidding for funding and finding new revenue streams is a priority for us going forward. That's part of the strategic plan. We have put in some bids. We haven't had a successful one at the moment over the COVID period, but we continue to apply. We have had some bids approved as part of the council's summer fund program. So this is 180k that the council got from Welsh Government to put on a number of programs to support young people over the summer period. And there are some specific programs solely around the arts that we're offering to young people through our service as well, to get them involved and to help support them going forward. So I hope that addresses some of those themes that have come up.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. I think I know there's been a lot of frustration, I think, that this seems to have been taking such a long time, and I appreciate obviously that the pandemic has impacted greatly upon that. But do we have a sort of time scale in mind at the moment for the options appraisal?
I mean, my intention is to bring something back in the autumn. What I can't tell you is what's going to happen with the next wave and what's going to happen with education and libraries and how that's going to impact us going forward, because there are going to be some priorities that come out of that. But as we have done over the pandemic, I know it's not the speed at which some members would have liked to have seen with regard to the arts, but we still made progress. And I can guarantee you that there will continue to be progress in relation to the arts and developing the strategy and working with our partners.
Okay, thank you. Well, obviously we'll bear in mind your comments about hopefully the autumn, autumn of 2021, I assume.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Councillor Johnson, if you would like to, any sort of comments you would like to sort of make to wrap up this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Some comments to wrap up and some just considerations. Thank you very much to Trevor in particular for his responses. I know that.
Well, bear in mind you can make suggestions, but not any proposals. But I'm sure you'll find someone to put.
Well, I mean, the main point is I'm sure you'll be agreeing the recommendations from Cabinet shortly, and I don't think there's any argument or criticism of that. Someone's raised a couple of points that I think have been part of the discussion. So first of all, thanks to Trevor for his responses. It's been very good to hear that, and it's a reminder of the amount of work that's going on and the importance of that work being regularly reported to committee so that that people can hear and understand what is happening, because a lot of that stuff I don't think I've heard. I appreciate I'm not a member of this committee, but it's part of the wider council ecosystem. A couple of points that I just like to make. I mean, first of all, I thought there was I thought Councillor Thomas made some important points around sort of the range of organisations that there are. I think there's a question for Trevor in developing things here about what is the council's responsibility and what does the council actually want to do, and how does that fit into the wider ecosystem of organisations and locations and styles of art across the Vale, because it's not just about is this options going to be just about what we want to do as the Vale Council, or actually how this fits into wider operational matters for everybody across the county. So I think there's an element there of requiring an inventory of other organisations and partnerships that can be created that would be very useful and helpful to have. I think there's a discussion about obviously about the finances and where these things involve a subsidy from Vale Council as as a body. We raise council tax, we spend council tax on behalf of our residents. What is important for us to what are we responsible for? What do we look to recover from in whatever form happens through our income generation? For example, I'll just throw Arts Council Wales funding into the mix. We were looking at the last year's accounts yesterday, and I think we seem to have fairly limited grants from Arts Council Wales that appeared in those figures. So I don't know how we're thinking about best ways of getting that, because that's public money that's not being spent in the Vale but is being spent in other places on organisations, and if they're spending six-figure sums on theatres and cinemas, etc., and we're seeing none of that, then that's actually a big gap in our funding that we should be looking at. I think there's a lot of importance being placed quite naturally on the role of the curriculum. We can see that, but art isn't just about children, it's about grown-ups as well. So we need to consider sort of all ages and all abilities, and how much of this is about it needs to be thought in the round and not just through the lens of the education service. I understand sort of how that fits in with people's roles within the council, but that's not the only element there. Councillor Burnett, I'm very grateful for her standing in for Councillor McAfee. She spoke very passionately about the Penarth Pier Pavilion, as did Trevor and as did others. I remember the start of this process, and I don't feel people spoke quite as passionately about Art Central. And when we talk about widening up access and things like that, Art Central is in the middle of a town which had Communities First funding, which still within so in the Castleland Buttrells area town centre. If we're looking at widening access, then actually that's the venue that needs to be considered. So there's clearly a buzz and an excitement amongst officers and cabinet members about the Penarth Pier Pavilion. That has to be just as buzzy around Art Central and other places as well. So I think we've had a very good debate. We've just been just over an hour. Thanks to Mr. Clark for his comments. Thanks to the other people who've written in from other organisations, and I'm sure that other people will want to become involved as this progresses. And I look forward to the options paper coming forward from Trevor in the autumn. So thank you everybody for for being here participating. I found it very quite fascinating. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to you for bringing it to committee's attention. Nick, you have a hand raised. No, you're happy. I'm just wondering, we've got the recommendations that came from Cabinet. Does anybody want to add to those as a recommendation to Cabinet? Or are we happy simply to endorse Cabinet's recommendations?
Happy to endorse.
Yeah. Ian, did you want to?
I was just going to say, I was not being a member of the committee, that obviously the officers and Councillor Burnett have heard all of the comments being made tonight, and they'll be detailed in the minutes, so taken into consideration, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd echo what you said, that I think we've heard that the officers and the deputy leader are enthusiastic about this. It's a pity, obviously, technology has let Catherine McCaffrey down, and that she can't be here as the cabinet member to put her views forward. But I think Councillor Burnett's more than adequately stepped into the breach. So can I simply say then that is committee happy to endorse the recommendations of Cabinet? Is there any dissent to that? I propose that. Would someone like to second it? Neil, I'll take that as you seconded that, and Nick. So unless I hear anything to the contrary, we'll take that as agreed. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. I think it's important to have this as a special meeting rather than tagging it on to the end of what was quite a long meeting on the last occasion. And as been said, we've had a good hour of this, which I think is very important. I can see Nick is suffering there greatly from the effects of the heat, as I'm sure we all are. So, okay, thank you all for your attendance, and I think this is possibly, with the exception now of council on Monday, which hopefully will be, well, I was going to say hopefully will be a happy affair, though we'll see. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night all.
Thank you, everyone.